Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Games Under Grace podcast. We are a podcast under the Geeks Under Grace umbrella. We are all writers on that website, and we are excited to tell you about video games this week, about what we've been playing, about news, and maybe have a topic of discussion. Usually it's me finding something to complain about, but first, some introductions. I'm Derek Thompson, and I also do tabletop and some gaming PR. And we also have Samuel Kim.
Hello.
Sometimes we call him Skim because he usually has the skinny on the Japanese news. And then Malachi Key is one of our editors.
Glad to be here, finally.
And you may notice that David Corey is missing. He is being a family man this week. Can't really blame him for that. But we will probably have him back next time. All right, so first we're going to talk about what we played this week. And so I have this feeling, I don't know if this is called ennui or what, but you know that feeling when you finish a book that was really good or a series and you put it down and then you're like, everything sucks now because nothing else is as good as when I was reading this book. And then you start a new book and it's like, this is garbage. Well, I finished Hades. I got to the, at least the credits. And then I started other games and they were bad. So that's a good example of a good game. I said in chat this week that I don't know if it's my favorite game of 2020. It's probably third or fourth, but I think that game is objectively a 10-10. It was quite good. But I spent forever then trying to find something decent to play. And today I played a short hike, which I just turned on and then played all the way through in one sitting. And it's such a complete opposite, unrelated to, I was playing an action game where you're killing everything. And now it's just a wander around and talk to people. And a short hike was better than it had any right to be. At first, I was like, this is kind of dumb. And then by the end, I was like, this is the most wholesome thing I've ever played. Sam, what have you been playing?
Well, actually, before I do that, I wanted to ask, what other games did you try to play to get the same experience from Hades?
Well, it wasn't the same experience. I was just trying. We're all working on Backlog Golf, which we'll talk about later. And
Okay.
So I was just trying to dig out anything that I had. So I started back up Iconoclast. Basically, when I bought my Switch, everybody was like, "These indies are great. Indies are great now." And so I bought a bunch of indies, even though they weren't really my style. And now I still have them, and I haven't played them. So I'm going back to Iconoclast. I did start it tonight again, but it's okay. I feel like the story is pretty good in that game and the platforming is cool, but the actual like writing of each line is very stilted. Like the dialogue is pretty stilted. I played the Monster Hunter Rise demo, which Samuel's going to talk about later, but that's just really not my style. And then I'm still in the middle of Tales of Zestiria, but I just got sidetracked. Also, my wife and daughter are back home, which means the TV that the PS5 is hooked up to, my daughter keeps wanting to watch YouTube on the big TV. So I ended up on the Switch. I feel like there was another game I was playing this week, but yeah. The short hike was good. Well, I keep helping my daughter. I have a 6-year-old, and I keep helping her with Untitled Goose Game because she gets stuck on something or other. So we were trying to put the ribbon on today. If you've played that game, you have to like get rid of a duck statue and then distract the lady and then go stand where the statue was so that the lady thinks you're the statue and puts the ribbon on you instead of on the statue. And it's a giant pain in the neck.
I feel like getting your kid to play Untitled Goose Game is kind of teach her to be more mischievous, and I want to watch out for that. She starts stealing random garden supplies.
Yeah, I may regret this later. We'll see.
Mischief will probably be ingrained into her.
Going from Hades to anything else is kind of like having a really gourmet steak, and then you have to go back to just, I'm getting McDonald's again. Not that I would know. I don't really eat gourmet steaks, but that's probably what it's like.
I do wish one thing that's annoying about Hades is that I just hate the fact that the Switch doesn't have an achievement list. So I think if I was playing it on Steam and actually had like a PC that wasn't crap, I would probably play it more and platinum it, or 100% it, I guess, or whatever you call it on Steam. And it has cross saves, but I'm not going to go buy it on Steam just to check what I've done on Switch. So I put 25 hours in to beat the final boss, but I was in God mode, in the easy mode. And we have another staffer that is trying to get the final ending, and she's 75 hours into it and doesn't have it yet. So One thing that I was reading this week about how to get the final ending, and from what I can tell, the internet doesn't know how to do it, which is surprising. There was a lot of like, if you do all this, it works, but we're not sure which parts are necessary. So like, just do all of this, maybe it'll work. But I couldn't find any clear guide on like do this and this and this exactly, and that's how you get it.
That's kind of impressive. I really like, especially with the internet, it's kind of hard to put out a game that collectively stumps people for more longer than like a week. But every now and then you have something like Fez or apparently Hades that people are like, I don't know, dude. I'm curious to see how long it'll take people to figure it out.
Yeah. Like the more I've been playing Hades recently, the more I'm kind of realizing there are a lot of parallels between Hades and Binding of Isaac. If any of you guys remember that old game, except that like I think Hades has managed to find a way to nuance what Binding of Isaac did really well, which was give you more stuff to unlock, and give you more reasons to like try to complete the game over and over on the harder difficulties for that matter. Because like by the time Binding of Isaac Rebirth came around, like, oh my goodness, I'd have to check again, but I think it's like close to 20 endings at this point that you can get for that game. And I mean, it's like it's mostly nothing really. It's just like little bits of lore that hint at possible things about the key characters in Binding of Isaac. But it's all really about just like, hey, if you go all the way to the womb and defeat Mom's heart like 10 times, then you get the true ending. And then, oh no. And then after you do that, it's like, oh, now there's another dungeon that you can get to, and that one's even harder. And then like they just kept adding more to the point where it's just like, okay, I need to stop because some of these later bosses are absolutely ridiculous. So, but with Hades, I really enjoy how every death still feels like progress, even though you haven't unlocked anything new or made any like material progress. It still adds in like bits and pieces of the story with each death to make you like feel like, oh, I'm still accomplishing something, which is like that's really good positive reinforcement for the player. And I think that's why I think that's why it makes playing a game like Hades much more enjoyable over like how Binding of Isaac does it.
I will say, without getting too much into spoiler territory, there's a in Hades. Once you escape once, you can turn up the heat. So there's like ways to make it harder and to get more rewards.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was like bosses have like extra abilities. And when I did that one, the first boss changed drastically. And I thought I was like out of surprises in that game, and they still surprised me again. So I was even like 20 hours in, I was still like, man, this game is still pulling stuff I didn't expect.
I feel like when it comes to those, looping roguelikes, you have either the kind of person, you have like two kinds of people, where you have the person that's, oh, there's more endings? Well, I got to unlock all of those. Or you have someone who makes it all the way in and they're like, that's it. I've had enough. Goodbye. I haven't played Hades yet, but my experience with games like this tells me I'm probably only going to do it once. I know I beat Enter the Gungeon, and I was obsessed with that game for a while, but once it had tortured me enough for me to make it to the ending, I was like, okay. Like, you want to unlock more characters? No, I'm done. Sorry, bye.
It's funny that you mentioned Enter the Gungeon because that was like the next big roguelike that I played after playing Binding of Isaac. And like from a Christian standpoint, I know playing that game can be controversial with how it depicts no, Binding of Isaac, sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, sorry, guns are very
yeah, sorry, I'm comparing the two for me. So like, yeah, as much of a controversial message Binding of Isaac may have towards religion, like there was still something about that game that just kept kept bringing me back, even though like after a certain point it's like, well, I kind of already unlocked everything, but I really want to play again because and I think the biggest thing about that was in Binding of Isaac there are really bad builds, but then there were some really broken builds, and I get that same feeling from Hades as well. And right now that's like the biggest thing that's getting me to keep going through another run with Hades as well. Just like I'm really excited to see what combinations of boons that I can get to really like expedite my runs. Like a recent run that I had, I was using the spear, and I was upgrading my special, and then I picked up an upgrade that turned the special into an exploding projectile, and it was actually like becoming a pretty good room clearer for me at that point. And I was just like, oh, oh, oh no, I feel it again. That itch for broken builds. Now I want to keep playing the game. So, but sorry. To go back to my point. Sorry, I just kind of realized I went on a tangent again. But yeah, for Enter the Gungeon for me, I feel like the biggest problem with for that game is that it takes a little too long to really appreciate how that game plays. Like even after a while, it still kind of felt like it's hard to really feel like I'm making progress in Enter the Gungeon as much as it felt like I was making progress with Binding of Isaac. Um, so I don't know. It's possibly one of those more nuanced things. Because like considering all the other things that Enter the Gungeon does much better compared to Binding of Isaac, like movement's better. There's more of a focus on the projectile mechanics in Enter the Gungeon compared to Binding of Isaac, where it was like Binding of Isaac was kind of a throw every idea at the wall and see what sticks, whereas Enter the Gungeon had like a better idea of what they wanted to do with their weapons. But I don't know. It just felt kind of uh, simple, I guess, for me, anyways. And it was kind of like I'm not sure why I don't enjoy Enter the Gungeon as much as other people did, and I do want to appreciate it in some way, but it's like I don't know, something about Binding of Isaac having that simplistic game style, like it borrows heavily from Legend of Zelda 1 with how, most of its dungeon design at the very beginning, and then it just kind of like kept adding more stuff to it, which was kind of like in a lot of ways it's really chaotic, and when you're a new player going into that game, it starts to feel like extremely overwhelming. Like there's a final DLC coming out for Rebirth. I think next month or the month after, and that's just like I'm not even sure if I could even go back to that to Binding of Isaac for that expansion, because at this point it's like I kind of already played it out, but I still appreciate it more than most of the other roguelikes that I've ever tried out. And Hades has been the only game out of like all the other roguelikes that have come out with that are like somewhat similar in how you traverse, that it's just like, yeah, I want to keep playing this game. Like I want to keep going through runs. I want to like hit my head against the wall and just like make my way to the end no matter how sloppy it is.
So what you just said about those two extremes about throwing everything against the wall and then being simple, I feel like Hades hits that middle ground where it's there's a lot you can do, but it's focused. I feel like that's the word I would describe with that game. It's very focused. My only complaint I can think of is I felt like 10 runs to get the ending was like 10 successful runs. Felt a little unnecessary to do it that many times, but I really wasn't sick of it. But speaking of focus, Malachi, what have you been playing?
So it's been a bit of a busy season. Actually, I haven't been playing games as much as I would like, but this past weekend, or was it 2 weeks ago? Wow. Okay, this year is already kind of. No, I think it was this past week. Yeah, that's right. This past weekend, my siblings got an Oculus Quest 2 for Christmas, like a belated Christmas present, and I got a chance to play around with that. And I've got to say, a lot of people have the constant discussion: is VR a fad? Is it a trend? Is it going to die out? I think it's only getting better, honestly, just from stuff that I've tried out. And then seeing the Quest 2, it's got its issues. Don't get me wrong. I cannot stand the fact that you have to have a Facebook account to use it. I'm big on the idea of digital privacy, and that's by far one of the most egregious things I've ever seen any company do.
Yeah.
They're like, it's fine, you can just make one. It's actually, we could probably discuss even more of this later next week, but it's actually become a big issue for developers because they have to maintain Facebook accounts to be able to develop for the Quest. And a lot of the accounts have just been banned by Facebook for like odd activity because they'll make like burner accounts and then Facebook will be like, this isn't a real account and ban them. And then they're like, well, now we're locked out of development access. It's a very weird issue, but the Quest itself feels good. It's a proper wireless VR headset. It's got just enough more power than the Quest 1 to where it can run stuff that actually feels decent. Like the Quest felt very restrictive in terms of its lineup, where this is a little more approaching like the kind of games you get from a proper VR headset. But all that is to say, I tried out Beat Saber. It was fun. All the little like things that come with the Quest 2. But my highlight has to be Super Hot VR, which was something that I played all the way through this past weekend. So I've played the original Super Hot, and I've just got to say they're not at all comparable experiences. The gameplay mechanic was pretty much made for VR. You might as well call it John Wick, the game. I know John Wick has a game. It's not as good as Super Hot VR. Like legitimately, I worked up a sweat just in terms of how much that mechanic works excellently in VR. It had me at points literally crawling on my knees trying to reach a gun that was like just out of reach and almost hitting my head on stuff because in real life I'm not peeking out around the corner. There's a table there. Should have mapped out the play space better. One point I almost tripped over my dog several times. I actually have
Oh man.
I have two dachshunds who are born pacifists. Like they panic whenever they see anybody fighting. And one of them started losing his mind at me as I was swinging at the air because he thought I was fighting off a burglar when there was no one there. I don't know what to say. What else to say? It's a really great experience. I mean, the mechanics work excellently with it. The whole idea of time moves when you move is put in a whole different context in VR because it's like you have to make it work up a sweat. Is all I'll say. Yeah, that's it. It's just a really cool experience, and I'm excited to see what else VR will do. But I think Super Hot VR is one of the better experiences available out there right now.
Speaking of time mechanisms, I remember the other game that I played this week was Transistor, because I was like, I'll just buy every old Super Giant games because Hades was so good. And Transistor is weird. Have you played that game, Samu?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a game I really need to get back to because that's one of those games where it's like, oh, okay, so this kind of plays like a JRPG, but it's really different. And I really like how the combat in that game is where it's like, it's kind of like surprisingly, it kind of reminds me of Tales of the Tales series with how their battle system is. But at the same time, it's like, it's still time based. If you really want to like cross wires, it's kind of similar to like how turns work in Star Renegades, and then you combine that with the active battle system from a Tales series, but then you put it into an isometric grid.
After you turning me off to about 20 games in our past talks, you finally convinced me. Comparing that to Tales kind of made it click in my head. Because at first when I was playing it, I was like, what am I doing? But that makes more sense. I got to go back to it.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because like, for me, having played Bastion and Transistor to a certain extent, um, to me, Hades kind of feels the uh, like the combination of every single Supergiant game that has come before it, and it's like applying all the lessons that they've learned and all the good, absolutely good things from each of those games into one game, and then it's like, okay, we think we have the best best like gameplay cycle. So what type of game should we apply this to? Oh, a roguelike. Perfect. And then you get Hades. With a bit more time in the oven, but you know.
Yeah, part of me wants to call it their magnum opus, but then I don't want the next game to suck. So, but I do think it'll be hard to follow. If I were them, I'd be putting out some DLC before I worried about making another game.
I don't know if
Or
you'll
just
get
change
that though.
direction. For some companies, it's best to just go, oh, we put out a really good Hades. Let's try a different genre and mess around with that before we think about Hades 2, because you want to really make sure you get your concepts down and see if there needs to be Hades 2. Otherwise, you just release a sequel that can't live up to the original.
Well, I think,
But sometimes it works. Splunky 2, for example, is a really good roguelike that managed to came out recently, managed to follow up on the original as well. So
that was a long time ago between those two, though. And considering how Supergiant works, it may not be the best idea to just assume that they'll do a sequel of Hades, or even like a Hades 2 with just like different characters or anything like that. If they were to do something similar, it would probably be like, I don't know, Niflheim or oh my goodness, why am I blanking on Japanese mythology right now? Whatever that would be, or something like that.
But DLC, I mean, I guess their past games don't have a DLC, but it seems really obvious what you could. I mean, adding a seventh weapon, right, is an easy.
a gun.
Spoilers.
That's just a gun.
You haven't played it yet, have you?
I have not played Hades. Okay, now I know there might be a gun in there.
There is a gun.
Yeah, congratulations, you guessed one of the weapons.
Well, that was the only thing I wanted. I was keeping me with playing Hades, but I said, there's not enough guns in this game, and now I'm convinced. So
interesting enough, like after people in our group chat were talking about Hades, and they were bringing up the gun, and I'm just like, what's so good about this gun? And then I unlock it, I'm like, and it was by far like my most successful run so far, getting me all the way to the 3rd dungeon, and I'm just like, oh, I see. Except the only problem is I'm playing that game completely differently to how I was playing it before, like even with the bow and arrow, and I'm just like, okay, I'm not gonna touch this weapon anymore until like I either beat the game with every other weapon first, and then just use that weapon as my run clearer, because that weapon is by far like the most reliable weapon, honestly, because it's like because even at its base level, it's like the range is good. It hits enough times where it can cause enough hit stop that it's just like, yeah, no, like you want to talk about doing safe runs, you go with the gun. Otherwise, it's like just keep suffering and learn how to play the game more honestly with the other weapons.
I ended up clearing it the most times with the spear. There's a dataless upgrade called Flurry Jab. I don't know if you had that, but I always kept forgetting that the spin attack even existed. And so there's one where you lose the spin attack, but if you hold Y, you just constantly attack. Like you just don't stop poking. And it's very easy to just pin people from a distance, and then like if they can't move while you sit there and jab them over and over. So you can do a pretty safe run with the spear if you get Flurry Jab.
Okay.
Anyway, this is the second episode in a row where we've just ranted about Hades, which I guess is a testament to that game. But
we'll probably be talking about it for a while. So
Tangents Under Grace. That's the new name I'm thinking.
Oh no.
Right,
I don't want to think about trigonometry anymore.
The math professor in the room takes offense. But let's go ahead and switch to news. So I mentioned Monster Hunter Rise. The demo's out this week. And Sam, you played it a lot more than I did. So why don't you give your thoughts?
I mean, you say that, but I don't know if I would consider your playtime even considerable.
Yeah, I basically turned it on for 5 minutes and turned it off.
Fair enough.
That's okay. I'm trying not to buy new games.
Yeah.
As long as you see a monster, it counts. That's a playthrough.
I don't think I saw a monster.
See, that's the problem. I'm just like the plumber looking at the issue and it's like, see, that's your problem there. But yeah, I mean, I know I said last time that I may consider putting this one off, even when it comes out. Um, as much as I would love to play this game, I basically just went through the tutorials of the demo so far. But yeah, these new mechanics, the wire bug and the wyvern riding, are such fun mechanics. Like, if I haven't played any of the older Monster Hunter games, but going into World, it's like uh, one of the biggest issues I had was a later mechanic you get where you can ride like animal buddies to get around. The problem was you couldn't really control them. You kind of just had to um, you had to call for one, wait for them to come, and then set a checkpoint on your map for them to take you to, and then you basically just have to wait. And like, especially for as big of a release as Monster Hunter World was, that mechanic kind of felt um, like it felt really half baked for me, and it was just kind of like, I mean, I guess I can just think of it as taking a break, um, after suffering so many horrible times and just trying to get that one piece that I need for that new armor I really want to make. But other than that, um, the wire bug function is really cool. Uh, Basically, the way it works, I would call it like the Epona mechanic. Except like, you know how in Legends of Zelda, Epona, when you ride Epona, um, she has like dash charges that she can use, and then you have to wait for them to build back up. The wire bug essentially works the same way, except the wire bug lets you traverse through the air, and you have two charges. It's like really snappy and it's really good too. Like uh, there are two context actions where um, I believe it's uh, the ZL trigger, and then holding that down and X will shoot you up, while uh, ZL and A will shoot you forward. And if you're in the air, ZL and A shoot you back down to the ground. Um, and you can also aim it as well. And apparently, it's going to be used to initiate wall running as well, but I haven't tried that yet. Um, so I think in Rise, that mechanic is definitely going to be important. Because I can already imagine, like, considering a lot of the enclosed spaces that were in World, like, just having that ability of traversing an area will open up many different ways where you can attack giant monsters. Like, you can wall run and then attack them from the side, and just give you a ton of other approaches that you can do. Um, and then the other thing, and this one's actually big because it's probably like the most insane mechanic I think the Monster Hunter team has ever done, which is the wyvern riding. So normally, when you're attacking one of the bigger monsters, you have a slight chance of mounting that monster, and then just basically do a long time, like a somewhat drawn out timed event where you're basically just trying to knock it down, and that was basically it. But what wyvern riding, as it implies, it lets you, if the monster is in a knockdown state, you can then actually take control of the giant monster and then ride it for a bit. And uh, remembering from the trailer, you can also use it against other giant monsters that may be in the same map, and fight against them with it as well. It's really interesting because um, it also adds like additional weapon actions depending on what weapon you have, and that's already like okay, because each of the weapons of Monster Hunter, uh, my friend who told me about this before who was like training me through Monster Hunter World said that basically every weapon in Monster Hunter is essentially like uh, getting access to a character action player character where like they all have their own moves and unique skill sets uh, that add something to how you play through the game. And so with Wyvern riding, I think it adds like uh, a few other dismount moves and moves you can do while you're riding the giant monster as well. That's already like, oh my goodness, like this is another. These are like another handful of moves I'm gonna have to remember, and that honestly excites me because like like being able to do more moves is always fun for me. It's basically like, you know, like if Devil May Cry 5, um, like they decided to do another DLC, and I was like, okay, now you can play as Dante, but you also get Nero's moveset on top of that, and I'm like, yeah, give it to me. I don't care how complicated it is. Just let me like experiment with everything. So yeah, like even playing those 2 tutorial missions I did, I was just like my mind was racing with like what kind of stuff I could do in the full game eventually, and that's why I'm gonna play it later tonight with the first hunt actually, and just see what else I can do. I'm really excited.
Yeah, what you're describing about it and the little I played of it kind of gave me Horizon Zero Dawn vibes with like overriding machines. Um, but Horizon Zero Dawn also has an excellent story. So I think here I'll probably wait for reviews, and if the story's good, I might check it out again.
Well, I think the problem with that approach is that Monster Hunter isn't really about the story. I will say it helps because that's definitely what helped sell Monster Hunter World to many people who never played a Monster Hunter game and get attached to how that game works. It's just like it's kind of like I'm not sure if I want to make this comparison. I would almost call it like the anti-roguelike in a way, where um, it's not about failing fast and then going again. It's about it's really about like planning. Like I would almost consider it similar to um like playing a Hitman game, if that makes any sense. Because in Hitman, you know, you have many different methods in a mission where you can eliminate a target, right? But if you plan it out, you stake out the area, you look at other approaches that you can do while you're in the mission. Um, you know, your plan can change, or you may want to try to do it a different way. I would say Monster Hunter is very similar to that. Um, Granted, uh, I believe Monster Hunter World has a lot more leeway compared to the older games, but like if you just just go into it expecting like, oh, I'm just gonna treat this like any regular action game, that's not really how you should approach it. You should approach it as if it's like, no, like think about it. You're taking on a monster that's 50 times your size. Yeah, you want to do some planning. You want to figure out what it's weak to. You want to figure out um, how it moves, how it attacks, what it's going to try to do if you got it on the ropes, or if you get it mad, because anger is an actual like like an actual status for the monsters in those games. Um, but at the same time, it's like it's kind of a primal feeling in another way too, where it's um, like there's the half where it's planning, but then the other half where like you just kind of go with the flow and change your plan accordingly to how it goes. Um, and there's some satisfaction uh, playing a game like that where it's really all about like just taking on this huge target, fighting to fighting tooth and nail until you finally achieve victory, and then claim your reward, make new armor or weapons, and then go out and do it again.
It's kind of like a delayed gratification versus instant gratification idea, where sure, you can have a game, plenty of games, in fact, that focus on creating spectacle, where it's like, what if you had this guy who's really good with guns and swords and uses the guns and swords to fight a giant dragon? That's cool, but a lot of times there's the idea of like hardcore versus like friendly to newcomers, and so you don't necessarily earn that battle as much as it's you almost like just watching this happen, where there's a distinct difference where when you do have cool moments, you're capable of knowing that, oh, hey, I did that. It wasn't just something the game threw at me and that everyone got to experience. It's my own unique. I planned this out, and or I was able to think on the fly when my plan failed. And from what I know, Monster Hunter has really, really long, like those hunts can take a long time too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's kind of an acquired taste. I want to get into it at some point, but from what I've seen of it, it's impressive because it really is a bit of a subversion of the narrative, where it's like you want to feel like a cool action hero, but you don't have to work for it, and that's good for a lot of people. But in contrast, I like the idea of having a little more substance, a little like, hey, you have to be a cool action hero, but that requires prep time. Any Batman fan will tell you that you can't beat Superman if you don't give him like a day of prep time to get all his kryptonite stuff together. So
Speaking of characters, like Sam talked about with other characters' movesets, there was some news this week that Byleth and Smash, that everybody threw a fit about yet another Fire Emblem character. There's a reason for that. She actually has somebody else's moveset from a third-party character that fell through. And if I have the story right, there's no proof but suspicion that it was supposed to be Monster Hunter, and that's why we got some stages and whatnot from Monster Hunter at that time, but no characters. And the Capcom doesn't actually generally want Monster Hunter to be a character in other um, media, which is probably how it fell through. And I did actually think it kind of makes sense. I did find that Byleth was a strange choice of a Fire Emblem character to use. I mean, I know she's the main character, but she's also somewhat of an avatar. So it jives with me. I don't know. I guess I can't verify the veracity of that article, but makes sense. It's also kind of interesting to think about what's coming next for Smash still, and it's also a testament to Smash itself that what are we like 2 or 3 years later that we're still having Smash news every week.
Yeah, just about. And I mean, to be fair, like, as much as like this gets my brain going about like I kind of want to talk about uh, the next DLC fighters, because obviously who doesn't want to talk about the next DLC fighters, as silly as that is. Um, it's also just like the other problem is with anything related to a Nintendo IP, you always have to take this stuff with a grain of salt. Because I think if I remember correctly, when Sakurai did that video presenting Byleth um, when that character was dropped, um, I think he clarified that Byleth was originally supposed to be in the game in the base roster, but they didn't have enough time, I suppose. And I think like Three Houses wasn't even out yet um, when Smash Ultimate was supposed to be released. So who's to say? That being said, according to this article, the insider uh, who talks about these claims, it seems to be somewhat reliable. So who's to say, really? But then again, like it's already a pretty dicey issue to talk about a character that's already been released. And then like I don't know, saying uh saying that they could possibly still get added into the game is also pretty dicey. So who knows?
One thing that I think lends credence to the idea that Byleth was kind of unintentional. If I remember right, for the second pack, she was the fifth character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I feel like in general with those packs, you want the final reveal to be like, "Ta-da! Here's our big surprise," and it was kind of like, "Here's another Fire Emblem character." I mean, I don't know
It's still
what the kind of,
anticlimactic. It's almost kind of like, fans memed on that hard because that's such a Nintendo thing to be like, here's another Fire Emblem character. What, you
yeah.
guys don't like Fire Emblem?
I mean, I
Oh,
do,
I'm
and I
sorry.
think if she had been first instead of fifth, probably there'd be less backlash. But like capping off a season pass with like Fire Emblem again, it makes sense that maybe that wasn't on purpose.
Especially after some of the crazy ones we got before Byleth too. Like, oh shoot, hang on. You know what? Let me look at it again.
Hero was in that pack, I think, which is also just um,
Piranha Plant was there, right? Was that part of that pack? I don't remember for sure.
Piranha Plant was
that was
included in the base roster actually.
yeah, that was a bonus for pre-ordering or something.
You're
But
right. You're right. It was their day one.
but Hero was such a similar character too in terms of like genre and a little more of a more interesting pick, but also another Avatar character, right? So having those two close together seems a little strange.
Yeah, I
Yeah, but the
mean,
difference is Heroes, from a franchise that hadn't been added yet, and so it was kind of at least
Right.
moderately interesting. So fans were like, "Oh yeah, Dragon Quest, take it or leave it." But as a new character here, a new pack. Byleth is a bit of a different story. So I see the story is pretty likely. Like you said, it's kind of an odd pattern to have the fifth character just be another Fire Emblem character, not just, but
And if my pulse is correct on Fire Emblem fandom, I'm pretty sure Edelgard is by far the most popular character from that um, game. So
she
I think if
was.
they were, yeah. So I think making it Byleth instead of Byleth is kind of a blank slate in the sense of being an Avatar character. So it also makes sense that that's the person that you could copy a moveset from, some other character onto.
Yeah. I mean, personally, the only reason why I'm even entertaining this article is just because, like, the idea was now presented, and then, like, knowing how Byleth's moveset works, I'm just like, you know what? It's entirely possible it could have been a character, a Monster Hunter character, like, with like the arrow, the axe, like how the smash attacks work with the spear and everything. I'm just like, oh yeah, no, absolutely, it could have been a Monster Hunter character easily. And like, it hurts even worse because it's also like playing as much of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite I did. Yes, there are people who did play that game. People, don't be surprised. Like, you dig deep enough into that game, there is actually a good game in there. Everything else about it was just unfortunately terrible. But like, it really sucks because Monster Hunter in that game was DLC too. But you play that character in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and it's just like, oh my goodness, this character is so much fun. She doesn't play like any other character from that game, and it's such like a suitable like uh it's such a suitable character that pays homage to the fandom as well. That's just like, man, like, I want to see the Monster Hunter character in other fighting games now. Like, that's how good it is because there's so much you can do with just the blank slate character of a Monster Hunter, because like you can literally have it be anyone, and there are already like certain armor sets that are so popular just in general within the Monster Hunter franchise that it's like you just slap on that armor onto a guy or a girl, and then you just call it the Monster Hunter, and it's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, nobody's really
a
gonna
lot of
complain.
cosmetic options too. Lots of skins. Do something similar to how Robin is with the male and the female options and the variety of skins, and it would bring in a new audience. They said that it was just they just didn't want to be involved in another IP, but they also have this character in Marvel vs. Capcom. What was the exact reasoning for it?
Well, that's Capcom's game. I
Yeah.
think it's a
That's a
different.
good point. So they don't want to work with another company at all in the franchise. That's the trick.
That seems to be the
Like,
gist
did
of
they say
it,
why?
going off of that article. So
I mean, I'm sure it comes down to money.
We have Capcom characters in Smash. I don't know. It just seems odd to me.
yeah,
But
some or I don't know why Monster Hunter in particular is the problem, but who's to say really? Um, and before we go on to our last news bit, like it was presented to me as to like who's another possibility for one of the last DLC characters for Smash Ultimate. And thinking about it, I'm just like, oh my goodness, that's actually entirely possible. Either the next or the last DLC character could be Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden.
that would be a really good pick, honestly.
Yeah, because that's like the last long-standing Nintendo game that doesn't have a representative at all, and it's also Japanese, so it's like it's even more likely to. Uh, no way to tell, obviously, and that's just a theory. Um, but it's just like, if Ryu Hayabusa gets announced, I'd be super excited personally, but I would also laugh really hard because I know for a fact that there's probably going to be a lot of people mad about that too.
Well, it's a nice rounding out, I think, because they've been with this last set of fighters. They've branched out a little bit. Steve was obviously everyone's. Oh, that couldn't really. Oh, that actually has happened. Wow. Um, you had Sephiroth. It seems like they're going for like, okay, let's bring in some more characters from certain franchises and round it out neatly. It wouldn't surprise me to bring in one more new franchise character, or maybe another character from a franchise that's already existing. I mean, my personal pick is I want to see Dr. Eggman just to complete the whole idea of we have a hero and a villain character. I think Dr. Eggman is one of the best possible picks for a Smash character just because it's a long-standing franchise, been around for a while. He has an impossible amount of different forms. You just
Mm-hmm.
like look at all the Eggman robots. You can do a lot with that. Like I said, the hero villain combo is great too. We have Cloud, we added Sephiroth, Sonic, put Eggman in there. That's just personal preference.
Sam and I were talking about M. Bison for the same reason.
I think he'd be great too.
Yeah. Good. Oh, jeez. Excuse me.
You have to edit. It's fine.
No, it's fine. I don't care. But yeah. I mean, like, I think M Bison is the obvious choice, even though I think most Street Fighter fans would say no, it should be Sagat. And it's like,
No,
you're not wrong, but at the same time, it really has to be M Bison because he is the villain.
He's iconic. He's the face of like Street Fighter villainy.
Except the other problem too is that if you really think about it, if you want to add the villain equivalent, it should really be Akuma. Only problem is you'd have once again the Shoto clone issue, which has already been a long-standing issue in fighting games in general. So I don't think we need to do any cross-pollination of that problem.
What I would like to see, and then we'll move on, is that they add M. Bison at the same time without telling anybody. They add a code where if you pick Ryu and you do the motions, you get Akuma.
That'd be good.
See how long it takes people to figure it out.
But it's like the old Smash rumors. I don't know. Like it was back in Brawl at least. People were like, yeah, if you play this amount, you can unlock Dr. Mario or just random characters, and they just put impossible conditions on it. They're like, yeah, you can unlock Michael Jackson by doing this. I'm like, oh, really? Like young me, like I gotta do that. No, you can't unlock Michael Jackson.
Yes. Back the days of my youth when I would look at Cheat Code Central for how to catch Celebi and Mew in Pokemon Gold.
Now I'm looking up grocery coupons, cheat codes.
Hey, those are better cheat codes. I don't know.
Yeah, those are cheat codes.
Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay. So the last, yeah,
go for it.
The last segment is Twitch actually doing something positive. a couple days ago from the point of recording. Oops, I dated the podcast. Oh well. Um, Twitch removed the PogChamp emote after the person of the emote, uh, Gutex, made some posts encouraging violence after the riot at the Capitol, and Twitch, I believe rightfully so, um, although there's some debate over it, I suppose. Uh, they decided to remove that emote.
Geeks
But
Under
then,
Grace is a nonprofit organization that does not support any political candidates.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
these
then,
views are only the podcast hosts, not the organization as a whole.
yeah. But then, what they decided to do, which I think is actually like a really cool idea, is oh shoot, what's the date of this tweet? Yesterday, um, every 24 hours they will rotate the PogChamp emote um, through faces of all their streamers. So Twitter has been blowing up with suggestions from everyone, and surprisingly, and this is kind of fun because I actually know the streamer that they picked for the first one. Twitch streamer Unruly, also known as Kenny, who's a member of the Yo Video Games group, led by Maximilian Dude, who's also a Twitch streamer, has been chosen for the first PogChamp emote. And like, you know, after watching some of Unruly's streams, I definitely agree. Like, that guy's a perfect candidate for PogChamp. He's a very good hype man. It's got a lot of uh, personal, positive attitude. Um, that I think it's just like it's always fun just watching him. Because like he's very wacky, but at the same time, uh, like very positive attitude, very excited attitude as well. Which is not easy for all streamers to do, of course. And then I think it's like, you know what, that's like an excellent PogChamp candidate. Um, hopefully, uh, hopefully they can keep up the good vibes with this method as they switch out the emotes. And I think they also said that like this way, if there ever comes a time where any of these Twitch streamers that are promoted as PogChamp, um, and they do something about as awful as Kutex unfortunately did, they can just remove it. So
yeah, it's probably more work up front, but it's going to be easier down the road.
Yeah.
Just cycle people out. You don't even have to really mention it.
Yeah, I think this is just
solution.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is not surprising. Twitch and a lot of other social media, almost all major social media platforms have been under fire of the whole like, hey, you're hosting this on your platform, and this major prominent person you have here is doing this thing. It's just been a problem across the board, and a lot of I think this is creative. I respect them for doing this because it's commonly the response is either we've ignored it and everyone's still mad, or we've removed this person and everyone's yelling at us for censorship. And either way, I feel like you rarely have something that's, hey, we've actually listened to our community and we're going to find a way to engage with it and to attempt to curry goodwill, because Twitch has been under fire a lot this past year.
Yeah.
So, cynical side of me is just like, okay, it's another marketing stunt. But it is, on the other hand, good to see, like, hey, you're listening to your community, you're actually engaging with it, even if it is just kind of a promotional thing. You've said we're listening to your concerns, we're going to actually do something about that, and we're going to find a way to reach out to the community and highlight people that are really making a positive impact here. So I think it's good. It's a rare thing to see, and I like it.
Yeah. That being said, the other things that Twitch has done should not be ignored just because they did this either, of course. Like
no, absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, like like I still want to applaud them because they could have easily just tried to ignore this, but at the same time, it's like, work's not done. A lot of Twitch streamers are still kind of in danger. What with the DMCA risks that run along with like stuff like audio and video now too. So you know, kind of like got to keep Twitch on their toes and make sure they don't try to undercut something else after doing this. So, and that's it for
It's a
news.
step forward, but yeah, I don't make sure you don't want to step back in other areas.
Mhm.
So we'll see how it progresses.
All right. So moving on, because all of us are a little bit sick of hearing about this week. One nice thing that started in 2021 was that Malachi and I are in a group called Backlog Golf, and the way this works is every game you beat this year, you get a -1, which is good because it's golf. But if you buy a new game, you get a +1, which is bad. You play it, you get another +1, which is bad. And then it's part of your backlog, and you can beat it. If you platinum a game, you get another -1. And so the idea is to encourage us to, be a bit more financially wise. It's like Dave Ramsey for video gamers. Maybe not that extreme, but
I think Dave Ramsey is a gamer. That's just my personal theory. So
well,
implied that he can't play games.
yeah, that's fair. If anything, I mean, financial planning is a game in and of itself, right? But in any case, so we
Don't
started
give
this
him any
week.
ideas. He's gonna make a new book.
Yeah, that's true. um, in any case, one aspect of the backlog off is that you can abandon games if you're 3 hours in and you're just like, I don't want to play this anymore. And so I've already abandoned a couple games, but then also a few other people have talked about I just can't do this anymore, and I'm so sad about a couple of them. So I'll give some context and then just want to talk about what it takes for you to stick with a game or just to give it up. So 20 years ago, my friend Chris, I'm sorry if you hear this, Chris, bought me Legend of Dragoon for a birthday, and I started it, and I was like, dude, this is like a Final Fantasy VII ripoff. This is not that good, and he was crushed. And then recently, I felt bad about it, and I had my friend's Vita, and you could still buy it on the Vita store as like a PS1 classic. So I bought it, and I got about 5 hours in, and I told him that I was like, dude, I'm playing Legend of Dragoon, and he was just like so happy. Okay, I'm allowed to spoil 20-year-old games, right? On here.
Yes.
I don't care. Go for it.
Every JRPG has the entire motif of a JRPG is like, why is it this character? Because you're the magical hero. You're the luminary. You're the chosen one. Okay, but in Legend of Dragoon, when the third person in your party was also a chosen mysterious warrior, I just turned it off. I couldn't take it anymore. So I was about 5 hours in that I mean, you're already putting up with 20-year-old because it's not like a remaster or like like even like the Final Fantasy VIII remaster, you can speed up things or whatever, or like save anywhere or suspend. Like, no, this is a straight PS1 port. So you're already putting up with all the quality of life that you don't have. And then really, it's not, the story is bad, but also the translation is abysmal. Like the even just like the grammar is wrong, like quite a bit. So yeah, I just couldn't take it anymore. On the other hand, one of our guys was I mentioned I was playing Tales of Zestiria, and he was like, "I love that game, but I just couldn't do the combat." And I agree. The combat in that and Tales of Berseria are hot garbage. So what I did for me was I put the game on auto battle and I play my Switch during the combat, which seems bad. Like maybe I should just play another game. But I paid my $9 to get it on sale. I'm gonna beat this sucker, even if the computer does it for me, which is a whole nother feels bad. But I'm sticking with that one. And so my question for you guys is, at what point do you just say, man, I'm taking the L on whatever I paid for this game and I'm done? Or is it like, I'll just put it down for a year? Or is it like, you know what? No matter how many times it takes, I'm going to beat this. How do you draw the line?
So I would like to note that I'm very bad at beating games. To be quite honest, it's part of why I stepped into backlog golf is because I look at my shelf full of games and I go, oh, I should have beaten that one. That's the first game I got for the PS4, and I was really excited about playing it. It's been 4 years, and I haven't beaten it. That's partly because I'm very distractible, and so I'm also I have ADHD, and I feel like that factors into how I play games. So I have the bad habit of just getting really passionate about a game, like hyperfixating on it, But if I don't beat it within the period and if my brain is passionate about it, I suddenly lose all interest in it. That's just my general, like, how I've ended up not beating a lot of games. But to get specific, I feel like I have two examples. Actually, you know what? They kind of both fall into the same example. It's when I've worked myself into a corner. If I've put a lot of time into a game and have entered a game state in which I feel like I'm incapable of beating it as is, I frequently have no desire to go back to it because what am I thinking of? I haven't beaten Dishonored yet. I really should beat Dishonored. I know it's a good game. The problem is I got distracted while playing Dishonored. You know how in Dishonored you have the two different, like generally two different paths of different skills you can take, non-lethal versus lethal. I couldn't figure out which path I wanted to take, so I just kind of took a general amount of skills, and by the end of the game, I was completely useless in every category.
Oh wow.
Or what's the phrase? Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah, that was it. It's like I can summon rats, but I haven't upgraded my summoning rats enough to be good for more than one rat. But I can't do anything else. I just wanted to be able to summon rats. That's just one scenario. Again, I haven't still beaten. I'm looking at my shelf over here. I still haven't beaten Dishonored. So that's on me. I could restart the game or find a way to beat it in my current setup, but it's just a lot, and I have to motivate myself to get back into it. The other one I'm thinking of is Darkest Dungeons, which, like we're talking about roguelikes earlier, and what it takes to really have the game like motivate you to stick with it. And I feel like the roguelikes I have been able to beat are ones where the game stares me in the face and dares me to try to beat it, and I stare back at it, and I'm confident and assured, and I take on the challenge. And honestly, Darkest Dungeons and I had to stare down, and I blinked. That game is horrifyingly brutal. Like, I know Maurice said that he was capable of. He beat it, and he was like, "You should do this with your people." I'm not good at optimizing. Like, I have my classes of characters, and in Darkest Dungeons, it's permadeath when anyone in your party dies. Like, that character is gone. And so you have these scenarios where I get somewhere near the end of the game, and I build up my cool party of characters, and I'll be like, "All right, ready to go? Ready to go? Everyone's ready to go on this last mission? Okay." All of them have wiped out. That is my entire class of my best characters. Time to start building up more characters, and it just kind of got exhausting after a while. And I think I did it for me when I finally managed to pick myself back up. After a devastating loss, put another group of characters through boot camp, train them all up, and then had them all wiped out in the same boss battle that I lost my last party in. And to wrap it up generally in a point, I think when it becomes more work than play and I'm no longer having fun, that is my general cutting off point. Sometimes I am able to push through and be like, it's worth it just for the end justify the means, even if I have to work through this sucky part, it's worth it for a good ending. Other times it's just, man, I work 40 hours a week. I don't need to be working when I'm playing games. And this is what this feels like. So that's generally where I'm at. But hopefully this year, maybe, who knows? I might be both of those. We'll see.
I agree. If it's a restart, then I'm not having it. I have a vivid memory. This is going to show how old I am. So in Final Fantasy VIII, there was this weird thing where the boss's levels were like multipliers of your levels. It's like one of my friends, he always grinds at the beginning, and he grinded to like level 20 before the first boss. And then it was impossible because he didn't have like new skills, but like the boss was like always 4 times his level. So he had to restart early. But I remember getting to the final boss in Final Fantasy VIII, and I couldn't beat him. And this is before YouTube, whatever years it was. This is like 1998 or something. And I ripped the ending off of the disc with like a CD ripper so that I could watch it because I was like, I'm not beating this boss. So
I don't think that counts by backlog golf rules.
You can count it as an abandon.
That's true.
I'm just saying, yeah. If you're gonna have to restart the whole game, I am not interested. And I don't mean like a roguelike, starting back at the beginning, but like if you got to reset 40 hours, forget it. But does Dishonored have difficulty settings? Because I feel like you should easy mode it for 5 minutes and then.
I believe it does.
I might do that. The other issue is that my Dishonored copy is last gen, and so I might just make the jump to PS4 and buy the PS4 version of it eventually. Also, my Xbox 360 that I've kept running for 8 years might have just bit the dust, or at least the cord, because I think the cord got like bent out of shape during transport when I was moving, so now it's just a paperweight. So
Yeah.
it's honestly just the effort of having to go buy Dishonored for the PS4 and start over, which I'm okay with doing, but I don't want to right now. So eventually.
So I've
What about you?
uh so I've just been looking at my Steam list. It doesn't even reflect like games that I've given up on when I was a kid. Um and I mean, like, forget even uh games that I've accumulated ever since Steam came out. Um like, okay, let me see here. How many games in total do I have? Okay.
Too many is the answer. Annoying backlog golf. We can help you beat them.
We
Over
have Go ahead. I want to hear it.
Yeah, so I have over 1,000 games.
You sound like Joe.
Yeah.
Joe has figured out that he will not beat every game he owns before he dies. I'm pretty sure that's how that's.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, there's no way, and even then, it's like most of these games I picked up when I first started accumulating this collection. I was mostly getting like humble bundles actually at the time. Like,
Humble Bundles will do it for you. I did the same thing.
yeah, that was basically around the time when humble bundle or like gaming bundles were like starting out, and they were getting pretty big. Like, I have a section of Steam games that are basically just like, these are the games I know I'm not going to touch, no matter what. Um, yeah, and I called it Dust Collectors, and it's just like, even going through that game, like some of these games I've shelved, some of these I have completed and just haven't gone back to ever. Um, I don't know. Maybe I'll go through it again just to see what I did miss. But I mean, like, compared to you guys, obviously I really have a different um I just have a different mindset about video games, like, um because there's a lot of games I get from like uh itch.io, and like they're like uh with Japanese indie games in particular, there's so many of those games that have never made it over to um to the West, or they solely exist in like the small niche of people who are aware of those games, and like I can't add those to Steam either. So like, um, it's like there are so many games just in general where it's like, there are some games I'm gonna miss, and to me that's more that hurts me more than like not completing a game, if that makes any sense.
For sure.
Like not being able to experience some of the unique stories that are out there. Like, for example, um, itch.io is an indie game site for budding developers, like people who are just trying to get off the ground, like basically zero budget, spare time projects, stuff like that. These are people who are trying to make their dreams come true and stuff like that. There are people who want to express their own unique worldviews. Like, you go through that you go through that list on itch. There are a lot of people from the LGBTQ community who are just trying to present their own story, their own voices in the only way they know how to. Um, and I think that's like, I well, to be fair, I haven't played many of those games, but I think in another way, there's a like it's important to have a space where like all video games are represented, no matter how small or big they are. So for me, it's more like I would rather be able to at least experience a piece of any game that's available and not worry so much about not completing it. I mean, on the like, I literally have a list of called backlog golf myself, where it's about like these are games I want to complete eventually, and even then, it's like right now I only have 10 of the 14 installed, um, and it's like I'm not sure when I'll get around to completing them. But at the same time, it's like the amount of time that I did have with those games were enough where it's like I want to come back to these games at some point. Um, and it's like you can't really um, invest all of your time to every single game you want to play to completion, right? Um, so like feeling feeling like um, feeling like you didn't do a game justice just because you didn't complete it. Um, I feel it's like it's kind of a debatable subject for me, at least when it comes to video games, because it's much more interactive compared to like reading a book or watching a movie or a show or listening to music, where it's like but even then, like each of those experience is very unique on their own and separate from each other. So I don't think you should hold um, like quote unquote a completion standard for everything, because you know um, because maybe it's just like uh, you just can't invest enough time, or there just wasn't enough there to like keep you going. And there are plenty of games that I've dropped off, even after playing like I would argue like enough time that I've given to it, and then said like, okay, this was good, but it's not enough to like make me want to complete it, so I'll just move on to the next one. Although I think there is some merit to doing something like backlog golf, where it's like you should take the time to complete a game, because if you bought it, then you should at least try to appreciate it all the way through. So I definitely see the merit in that.
Yeah, I
Now,
mean, for me personally, I do agree in that there are a lot of experiences out there that was very inspirational. And it reminded me that I have the itch.io bundle and need to go back and find some of those smaller products because I forget those are out there and they're important to play through. I agree. But like for me, a lot of backlog golf is, I guess, an encouragement, because I have the tendency to either to step away from games or to spend a lot of time on one thing. And so really for me, it actually does encourage me to spread out to different experiences. Kind of like I got this because at one point I said, I'm confident that this is an experience that I'm going to enjoy. And so I'm going to spend money on it and, support this artist. And I never got around to it. Um, so I would say, I think for me personally, it's encouraging of, I've got a bunch of indie games that I have not touched. And even like larger games that have been out for forever, um, that I want to give attention to. But I definitely agree with your saying that beating it is not the end all metric of a game. Like it totally is valid to drop one off or to say, I've had the experience I need to with this. I've given it a chance and just, you know what? I've only got so many hours. I don't know how much time we have. So getting very philosophical in here today.
Another part of backlog golf is financial responsibility. For some of us, it felt like, man, we're blowing way too much money. And so, one thing that you pointed out about completing games versus spending money is another way we could approach it that we don't is like, rather than I'm going to beat these games, I can only buy so many games. It might be like I'm going to spend X amount per year. I'm going to budget an amount. In which case, something like a humble bundle is like, oh, there's 20. I don't need 20 new games, but on the other hand, it's like way cheaper than buying a $60 AAA game. So that if you twist it and you think about it, this in terms of like dollars rather than games, then stuff like Humble Bundle and Itch makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think considering the situation now and like what's already available and um, like the deals that you can get on video games digitally has probably just helped spread those games out even more. Like, you know, the Humble Bundle subscription plan, I would say, is probably one of the best ones you can get if you want to like actually have the digital games and own them for a relatively cheap price, for about the same price as a Netflix subscription. Um, One thing that's even better, to a certain degree, that works more like Netflix, but is even cheaper, or sorry, is the same price as well, is the Xbox Game Pass. And like Microsoft has done a really good job with turning that service into like one of the best subscription services ever. You can play it on Xbox or PC. Like, that's great. But to get back to the actual topic, because I kind of segued that into a more philosophical question. Like, when it comes to games that I've just dropped off of, there, um, I mean, I touched on it a little bit before, where it's like, I'll play it for a certain amount of time, maybe like half an hour to 2 hours, depending on like how big that game is. Um, a couple of games that I've played before and have dropped after spending such a long time with them. One of them was Tokyo Mirage Sessions for the Wii U, and to be perfectly honest, I didn't go into that game with the most positive mindset, so that's partly my fault as well. Because Tokyo Mirage Sessions was not the game that most fans were hoping that they would get. Originally being promoted as a Shin Megami Tensei cross Fire Emblem game. I was there
And
for the
neither,
SMT because I'm an SMT guy. Um,
but
that's
neither of those genres are nearly as fabulous as that game, which or other franchise, which is really what confuses me about that.
yeah,
Other pop
because
idol.
I think the biggest problem with that game is that um, like, and like I just said it right now, like it really isn't what people were hoping for, or even what people even expected after it actually got announced, because it doesn't even play like a SMT game. It plays more like a Persona game. And uh and for people who aren't aware of the SMT franchise, yes, there is a difference, surprisingly. I know that's going to be hard to believe, because technically Persona is a spin-off of the SMT franchise. But at this point, with how they've both developed, Persona and SMT are two separate entities from each other now. And but when I dropped Tokyo Mirage Sessions, I still remember it, where it was like, I think I made it to about the halfway point of that game, because I think there's like eight or 10 chapters, if I remember correctly. Derek, is that true?
I don't remember specifically. I did beat the Switch version last year, but I knew going in, like I didn't have the hype leading up to it. I kind of knew that it was like not what I would have originally expected, and that it was basically a slice of life anime with Fire Emblem characters in it.
Yeah, no, that's pretty accurate, because that's what I walked away with. But yeah, like I basically started um, the half point chapter. Um, they introduced a new character. It was the blonde, It was the blonde actress. I forget her name. That's how much I didn't care at that point.
It's like that's like halfway through, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like I was just sitting there going through cutscenes and kind of just realizing, oh, I've fallen into a loop. I hate this loop. Yeah, I'm just gonna return the game, and I stopped playing it right there. And I think I had already played like 20 to 30 hours at that point, and it's just like, yeah, that sucks because like I'd already given in my mind, honestly, even if I didn't go into it with a more positive attitude, which I probably should have, it's still just like, man, nothing about this game is interesting to me at all. Um, like if anything, it's like if anything, it was like it was kind of the moment of realization where I'm just like, maybe I don't actually like AAA Japanese games as much as I thought I did. Um, and it was kind of like it was a really sobering moment for me where I was just like, oh no, oh no, uh I'm more cynical than I thought, and that's kind of that kind of sucks. But that's not really true. The truth is like um I had just like I just realized I'm becoming more aware of what I actually like and recognizing that through games that I'm playing. It's not, it's like, you say to yourself as a kid, "Oh, I'm gonna be a Nintendo fan forever," but then you grow up, life has changed you, and you
Well,
kind of
Final Fantasy
realize, you know what? I'm not really a Nintendo fan. I'm really more of like just a Mario fan, really. Uh, and then that gets skewed even more. But
Final
yeah,
Fantasy VII showing up on PlayStation was like a life crisis moment for me. Like, what do I pick, Nintendo or do I pick SquareSoft? I picked SquareSoft.
which you should have.
It was a good choice. Yeah.
Yeah, because SquareSoft, oh man, back in the day, they were killing it for sure.
But in the case of that game, though, I feel like they took two AAA franchises and made a AA game. So I struggle to call that a AAA game.
I would call it a B game, honestly.
Well, sure.
It's about as bad as any of those like compile heart RPGs, because the structure is basically the same. You go through a somewhat generic dungeon, watch a couple cutscenes, an anime moment happens, then you fight the boss, and then another anime moment happens, and then you repeat the process over and over again. A lot of those Japanese RPGs are like that, unfortunately. And you don't
I'm
really
about
get like, and you don't really get like the same type of quality, or even like what I would call like a good enough contrasting experience, except from like uh Square Enix and some of Atlus's games.
You
And
basically described the Tales series to me just now,
mhm.
but I feel like they're somewhat saved by the skits. Like you have enough interpersonal moments with the party, and it kind of rises above like the somewhat mediocre shell. But Mirage Sessions didn't really have anything to like set it apart. Like it had the same boring shell as a lot of other Japanese games, but then no like its unique twist was like, oh, it's two series smashed together, but that didn't like elevate the gameplay any.
Yeah, and I mean like, and I remember too. We talked about it a long time ago when we were doing one of our practice podcasts, where we were talking about open world games, and like for me, I really can't stand Western open world games. At least like stuff like modern Fallout, um, save for New Vegas, which was the only one of those games that actually managed to stick with me for a fairly long time, in spite of the fact
New
that
Vegas is a great game.
yeah, in spite of the fact of the technical issues that game has, it was the only game of that type that actually managed to grip me enough where I was like, I'm naturally progressing through the story, but I'm also having like that actual open world experience that all those games of that type boast about, where it's like, yeah, you're gonna sink in so many hours and you're not gonna know how the time has gone. And I'm just like, well, I did have that experience, but most of those games I didn't really enjoy it. I was kind of just on autopilot, really. Um, like, and it's like, and that's not to discredit those games necessarily. I mean, like, you can't say in other ways, they did formulate like things that were important for modern video games later on, uh, but even at that time, it's just like I couldn't get behind those games, no matter how much everyone else around me was just enjoying those games, and it's just kind of realizing, you know what, maybe my tastes are just different from everybody else. Like I'm looking for very specific experiences, not necessarily like the most epic experience.
I
And
agree with that 100%. Like playing a short hike today, like I played that in one sitting. That game was definitely worth the $7 I paid.
mhm.
Like when games are like, oh, there's 200 hours. I'm like, what Malachi said earlier. I don't want to work. I work all day. Like if it's 200 hours, it's because at some point it's a chore.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
then pad it out. Like how much is 200 hours? I had to find how
yeah,
much am I just fetching things because the game told me to.
and now that I think about it, I think the first game I completed while going through college was actually Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, and that was actually also my first platinum game as well. Um, and it's
It's a
just like,
surprisingly good game.
yeah, going back to it now, it doesn't really quite feel that way anymore. I will definitely say some of the later games definitely beat uh, Revengeance out the water, but even then, it's just like playing through that game. I'm just like, oh man, like this game is like hitting everything for me. It's kind of awesome. Like even the annoying bits, I don't let it bother me that all that much. I just like cruise through it either way. And I think that's kind of what got me into character action games, was playing Revengeance and going like, man, I kind of like these kind of these kind of campy uh character character empowerment experiences where you're just like you're just an absolute you're just an absolute savage and you just blow through enemies like crazy. Not like Dynasty Warriors. Just want to make that clear. But uh, games where it's like it lets you feel cool, but at the same time you have to work for it as well. Uh, also,
That was kind of what I liked about Super Hot VR. Honestly, is
yeah,
it bring it all the way back, but it was the next step forward of the you have to work to look good doing it. Because the original Super Hot games, yeah, you actually are making those motions, but you never feel cooler when you're physically grabbing a gun out of the air and flipping it around and shoot someone with it. Like that's neat. You'll also lose weight doing it. I'll just say that. That's an advantage.
hey, that's good. Oh man, now I just kind of want to talk about titles from Platinum Games now. We should get off this subject right now.
Well, we're close to wrapping up anyway. I guess maybe in terms of committing, however much we're going to commit to beating games this week, maybe what's next that you guys are going to tackle? Because I got an hour left. I'm going to play something here afterwards.
I'm gonna finally finish Yakuza Like a Dragon. This has been the longest I've ever spent on a Yakuza game. I think it's partially because I don't know what it is. I think it is just a really long game. I think it's also the RPG elements and the fact that I'm not good at RPGs because I got stuck on it and I very briefly for the first time considered putting down a Yakuza game because there's a great moment when your characters run into like a precursor to the major boss fight like shortly before that and you hear like the characteristic laugh of a series like a main series character and you're like oh my gosh it's this character and they show up and they have a boss battle and I was like this is cool and then you wiped out all of my guys And I was like, well, that wasn't fun. Okay. And then I had to actually grind, which I wish I might need to rewrite my review because I said there wasn't that much grinding involved, and then I got to an actually challenging boss fight, and I had to do that. But I beat it. I'm glad to say that I did, and I'm on the verge of the final boss. I'm gonna finish that, and then I'm gonna take a break from Yakuza because I've been playing nothing but Yakuza games for the last 3 or 4 games that I've beaten. We're gonna play Cluster Truck next, which is a fun little indie game. Y'all may or may not have heard of it. It's a platformer where you are on a series of trucks that are consistently falling down, and you just jump from truck to truck. And I'm pretty sure the game procedurally generates levels. I can't remember. I just remember seeing some YouTuber talk about it and going, "That sounds ridiculous. I'm buying it right now," and I've never played it. So
Yeah.
hopefully, that won't take very long to beat. And I'm looking forward to doing a fun little review of just a very odd indie game where someone was like, "What if you just had a bunch of trucks and you're jumping on them?" They're like, "That's a good game idea. We're making that."
Cluster Truck is a ton of fun, honestly. I've played that myself. And it's just like this is so ridiculous, but it's also hilarious. Um I think for me personally, there's a lot of stuff in my personal life that's kind of crazy right now. So I actually asked if I could take this month and next month off just so I can focus on getting my life sorted together. If everything's good, then I might be able to come back and write an article soon. But I believe for my next article, I'm going to actually take on a game that I've always wanted to complete, which is the Silver Case. This was a game by developer Suda51 back in the day. It originally came out on the PlayStation 1, and it's a I guess it's a visual novel type game, but it does have some interactive gameplay elements to it. Um, it's very gritty. It's very adult. Lots of foul language. So, Derek, unfortunately, I think this game might have to be crossed off your list. But
For context for everybody else, I am the one staffer on staff that doesn't play M-rated games. Just as a general rule. I don't know why.
I'll play it.
yeah,
If it's good, I might. We'll see.
yeah. I mean, yeah, the Silver Case is cool because it's kind of like I guess I would describe it as like a Tokyo crime drama game, because it's about a serial killer that you're trying to chase down. Um, but I don't really know too much about it. But it has this like really haunting aura. If you go to the Steam page and you look at screenshots for it, um, all the art has this very stylistic, uh, stylistic but still somewhat realistic art style to it. Um, and it's kind of like the visual depiction of faces um, is kind of haunting and very I want to say noir esque almost. It's really interesting. I'm pretty excited about getting into it, but unfortunately, it's an older visual novel type game, which means there's a lot of reading to do. So hopefully, during my 2 months off, I'll be able to like get through it uh, fairly quickly in time for the review.
Man, I came here to push buttons, not read things. Come on.
So
What about you, Derek?
there was a Kotaku article maybe into last year about knocking out your backlog. And one thing that they said that surprised me, the rest of it didn't surprise me, but they said you should always start with the big games first rather than knock out the little ones because you'll run out of enthusiasm and then just not finish the big ones. So I'm going to finish Tales of Zestiria. But after that, I think I'm going to play Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus, which is a maybe Sam's heard of that one since he's heard of every little Japanese game. But it's the one game that Neon Falcom has made that wasn't an Isora Trails title. So they're big on for those two games or those two franchises. But it's an RPG that is kind of a modern day Tokyo, World Ends With You, Persona type vibe. But I basically bought it just because I'm a huge Trails fan, and it was on sale for like I think under $10 on PS4. So I'm gonna give that a shot, and then we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, just looking at it real quick, it kind of looks similar.
I
to,
stumped Sam.
That's a rare
No,
achievement. You
I
should
remember
roll
seeing
Xbox
it. I just
Game
haven't
Award.
like. I just never looked into it. That's the thing.
Yeah, I read it was a bit more of a dungeon crawl than like a typical RPG, so that has me a little skeptical for my style, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
Well, I
All
wish
right,
you
so that's
luck.
pretty. Yeah, and we wish you guys luck on whatever you knock out back next. So once Sam's got this uploaded, you can comment below on next game you're going to tackle on your backlog, and like and subscribe and all that stuff. But really, for content from us, if you go to geeksundergrace.com, you'll see lots of reviews and editorials and various things. Not only video games, but tabletop, movies, anime, all of it, Christian living. So we appreciate you checking it out.